And good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue Macdonald, and I'm the curator for Maternity and Midwifery Hour and Maternity and Midwifery Festivals, and it's my pleasure to be chairing the session today. Now, you'll see my background isn't quite the same as usual, and I haven't cleared all my bookshelves. I'm in a nice little hotel in Edinburgh, following the Edinburgh Festival, and this is where it's coming from. So we're doing it slightly different. We've got two fantastic video presentations from Nicky, Clarke and Grace Thomas, who are with us. They're in the flesh. They're with us. So you do watch the videos and then prepare your questions and send them in to us. And then we can have a discussion after both of the videos. Really focused on midwifery education within the UK. And I think you'll find, even if you're not an educationist, I think you'll find it really interesting because just like our colleagues in the NHS, we have stresses and strains and difficulties. And we're passionate about getting student midwives through to becoming midwives because we need lots and lots of midwives. So I'm going to welcome Grace Thomas and Nicky Clarke, who are going to appear on the screen any second. And because we always do this to us, we put them on the spot and ask them for a moment of the week. And so I'm going to ask first of Nicky, I'm going to ask her to share a moment.
Thank you and welcome everybody. And thank you for that, Sue. I suppose my people that know me know that I've acquired two puppies. We've got two now 15-week Labrador puppies, which are very, very time consuming. They're very active and they have done an extremely interesting archaeological dig in my back garden, of which I am very garden proud. And so moment of the week is really hitting home about the realities of having puppies. But they are very good. I wasn't very well last week and I had lots of puppy therapy.
Oh, wonderful. There's something about puppies and kittens. This is lovely.
I
So
know.
you'll have to put up with that archaeological digs. They
I
might
will.
find something interesting, of course, Nicky.
I think there'll be more joining, but yeah, the two Labrador puppies.
Oh, bless. Okay. And how about Grace? I think you've got a slightly different thing
I
to share with us.
have. Yes, lovely to see you, Sue and Nikki, and to everybody. Thank you for having me here this evening. So yes, I think my moment of the week is yet to come actually, because tomorrow I'm going away with two of my very closest friends who are both midwives as well. And we're going to Bath to the Christmas market and we're staying overnight and we're having one of our midwifery bonding sessions. And these two friends are very, very special because we've worked together probably in different guises for well over 30, 35 years probably. And you know the bond that midwives have. It's very, very special. And we worked as three consultant midwives in Wales together at one point in different regions, different health boards. So I'm very much looking forward to sharing the next 2 days as my moment of the week.
Fabulous. A little Christmas shopping, but
Absolutely.
some rest and recreation, and I suspect a lot of talking and
A
bonding and
lot of
sharing. How lovely.
maybe a
Perfect.
glass or two of bubbly as well. You never know.
Oh, now that sounds very excellent. Very excellent. I'm just a little bit envious, but I'll just hold that back. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Now just moving. We're going to just briskly do the usual little preamble, and I'm just going to remind people. Now I know that with us this evening, we're going to have people who know us very well, who come on every week, and we might have very well some new people. And I just wanted to say where we were born. The Maternity and Midwifery Hour was born in the spring of 2020 when the big lockdown in the UK happened, and midwives and student midwives weren't able to go to study days, conferences, festivals, and all the rest of it. And we really thought it was very important to have some means of linking up, a bit like the beginning of the refresher courses. Now, I don't remember that because I'm far too young for that, but that was in the 30s, I think, where people had the opportunity to meet together. But this is a kind of refresher course in a way online. So we started the hours then, and we had a lot of stuff about COVID-19 because people needed to know about COVID and what was happening, how people were coping with it, what the different strategies and policies were. Because you remember, if you remember that time, it was a very busy, very stressful time, and it was a time of huge change. And I have to say, for me as a midwife, I was incredibly proud of the midwives at all levels who were doing amazing things to make sure that women and babies were getting care, and families obviously, and in spite of COVID. And then we know that there were terrible difficulties in, for example, women being in labour on their own, but there was huge trying to get things right for women. Now we've carried on because COVID is still around, but not in the same way. And obviously the content has changed. So we've used the opportunity to get all sorts of things for midwives. And a lot of our regular people come from all over the world, which is lovely. And we have some fantastic questions. So I'm looking forward to some good questions later. And of course, everything is recorded because that's the way things are with maternity and midwifery forums. So if you have a power cut or you get called away, you can always catch up later. And if we're talking about something and you think, oh, I didn't know that there was anything about that. If you go onto the Matflix resource, now it's on the resources list, I should say. If you go on the Matflix website, you can find everything. And there are thousands of videos now. So it's really good resource if you're doing any studies, if you're doing a dissertation, if you're doing policy things, everything. Or, I mustn't forget, revalidation. Fantastic for that. You can really get yourself up to date in a really nice way. You can get all these experts talking to you, and it sort of sits in your brain nicely. So have a look when you get a moment. Now, I'm just going to say a big thank you to everyone for all the work you're doing. I always say that, and I always mean it, because it never is a quiet time in the NHS. It's never an easy time in the NHS, and people are carrying on providing that care to mums and babies and families. So good on you. Okay, now I'm just going to do a quick flash on news because I've had my brain in Edinburgh because of the festival yesterday, which was fantastic. And if you get a chance to have a look at some of the presentations, do have a look. Had a super thing from Professor Andy Shannon talking about PLGF testing to identify the risk of preeclampsia. We had Dr. Elaine Moore focusing on the midwives Twitch, which is all about intuition. So that was fascinating. And then we had Fiona Gibb, Jackie Lambert, and a wonderful student, Ella Bendel, talking about advanced practice and student network within Scotland. And I have to say, Ella was fantastic. And she was speaking with such authority in front of the minister, Neil Gray, MSP, Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care, who did the keynote speech. So it was a really good day. And there was a whole lot of presentations that were fantastic. And they're all available on box sets. And I always expect that to be in a box. But of course it's not. It's an all-electronic link, which is lovely. And also, I just want to highlight there was a really useful or interesting radio program last week, I think on Radio 4, on free birth in the UK, and it's really very thought-provoking. Also, that's on your resources list, so have a look at that. It's quite worth having a look at. And of course, it's still Epilepsy Awareness Month as well, as it's November. Now I'm going to whip like exactly on time in 1910 to introduce our wonderful speakers. And this is slightly unusual because usually we get people to present live and then we grill them at the end of their presentation. But this time we've used two of the presentations that were so good and gripping and kind of the moment. We wanted to share them much more widely. And I'm so pleased that both Nicky and Grace can be with us this evening to answer the questions because they're fantastic midwives. They're fantastic lead midwives for education. Hurrah for that. And they've got such a lot of knowledge and experience and skills to share. So I'm going to say, first of all, I'm going to introduce Grace Thomas, who's a reader in midwifery in the School of Healthcare Sciences, lead midwife for education and professional head of midwifery education, and the deputy director of our World Health Organization Collaborating Centre for Midwifery Development. And there's only 2 of those centres globally for midwifery. She also co-authored the WHO Midwifery Assessment Tool for Education, MATE, published by WHO in May 2020. And there's also a link on that in the resources that you can access. Grace was also a member of the Nursing and Midwifery Council Future Midwife Thought Leadership Group, quite rightly so, to develop new standards of proficiency for midwives in 2019. And they're coming up for review, funnily enough, I think next year, the year after. She's also Deputy Chair of the Lead Midwifery Education Strategic Reference Group and was appointed as a trustee to the board of the Iolanthe Midwifery Trust. I don't know how she fits that in, and I'm glad she's going off for a little break for a couple of days. Keep her going. And then we have Nicky Clarke, who's the chair of the NMC Lead Midwifery Education Strategic Group. And that's a very active stakeholder group for midwifery education across the UK. She's a nurse and a midwife and has been in midwifery education since 1990, working in several institutions. And she has undertaken many national and international external collaborations, working in the UK and across Europe and Asia, providing expert advice on programme approvals in midwifery, and also undertaking institutional quality assurance reviews across the UK and Croatia. She's also an NMC Quality Assurance Visitor and a Senior Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. And she has been and continues to be actively involved at a strategic level in national developments within midwifery, Labrador puppies allowing, of course. So thank you so much. We're going to now play the video clips. So listen, prepare that question and get it in, and we can have a discussion after that. So we have to roll now.
We all know at the moment that it's challenging times. We can't dispute that. I don't need to go through all of these reports. You're all aware of them. And it is challenging times for our profession, and therefore it's challenging times for our education and for our student midwives. And, you know, very recently we've had the report led by Mary Renfrew into review of maternity services in Northern Ireland. That's the most recent report, a very detailed evidence-based report. But all of these are throwing up the same themes, that we have challenges in maternity care that we need to be aware of. And then, if we're looking further afield, we have global challenges. And I make no apology, you know, I work closely with WHO. We have global challenges and we live in a global community. So we can't ignore those global challenges. There is war, there is famine, there are earthquakes, there are floods. And midwifery and maternity care continues in war-torn and in conflict areas. So there's even more challenges for midwifery education globally than we're facing here in the UK. And we need to be very mindful of that when we're thinking about what we're dealing with. So when we're continuing thinking about the global challenges, we need to acknowledge that across, even if we were just to think of the European region, but it's even more diverse globally, midwifery varies in terms of its educational preparation, in what midwives are allowed to do, what scope of practice they can practice to once they are qualified, and whether they're licensed or not. We also know maternity care is not always evidence-based. It's not always evidence-based in the UK, let alone globally. It's not always woman-centred. It's not always compassionate and respectful. And in some places, midwifery education is quite often taught by doctors or nurses. It's not taught by midwives. And often there's no hands-on practice-based education. Student midwives can go and observe, but they can't touch. That's a challenge. And it's also the challenge of having different academic levels of midwives. You know, when I go to some European countries, they talk about low-level degrees. They talk about low-level professions. You know, that's so odd for us here in the UK, but these are global challenges. And there has to be jobs, of course. So you could think, well, here in the UK, you know, we're extremely fortunate, aren't we? We have really strong midwifery, we have regulation, we have a profession, and we are licensed as such, aren't we? We're regulated, we're licensed. And so we're really fortunate. And are we then sitting on our laurels? Are we resting very nicely, very happily here because we think we've got it right, particularly in education? Well, I can tell you, the world is waking up and saying actually the UK hasn't got it right anymore. And we need to be cognizant of that. We need to be mindful, and we need to be recognising what the challenges are and tackling them, meeting them. So I'm going to go through what I think are some of the challenges. Recruitment and retention. You know, we all in university settings hear these terms constantly, don't we? We're challenged on our recruitment, we're challenged on our retention. We're fortunate in the profession of midwifery in that recruitment is still quite good. We have a buoyant number of applicants, don't we? We usually manage to fill all of our places, different to our nursing colleagues and to some other professions. But recruitment is challenging. Are we getting the right people in? Are we widening access and reaching the right communities? Are we educating midwives who are fit for purpose for the communities they serve? I don't think we always get that right. We talk about it a lot, but it's difficult to be able to do that in practice. And then, how do we retain our students? That's another challenge, isn't it? Again, in midwifery, we're probably doing okay across the UK with retention. But I think it's getting more challenging for us all the time. Students are leaving, they are stepping off programmes, they're not always able to come back. And we need to be looking into that. And I would suggest student expectation is a big thing we need to be considering. That's one of our challenges. Many of our students now are paying for their own courses. They're paying £9,500, very different to what it was maybe 10 years ago. They expect what they want from a university. And our universities, our HEIs are saying to us, student expectation is the key thing, you must meet it. But what the universities aren't always understanding is we are a professional programme. We're not just here to give students degrees. We are preparing them to enter the register as a profession. And we're not always getting that support from university sector. And where's the NMC in that? Where's the NMC to say to the universities, we need you to be really clear what student expectation is about entering the profession? I know sometimes that's a controversial thing to think about, but I think that student expectation is one of the challenges that we face in recruitment and retention. The other thing is financial challenges. You know, our students are struggling. The RCM produced this report. These aren't my words. The RCM released this recently, and it was really glad. We all knew that this was the case, but to have it there written down in a document is really important. We know students are struggling. We know they're on the breadline. We know that they cannot cope with driving to practice because they don't have any money. They can't manage their childcare responsibilities. So why are we expecting them to be able to juggle a full academic degree, 50% of placement hours on top of it, and make them pay for it, and take away whatever entitlements they might be entitled to because they might be earning a little bit more? They all have jobs as well. How do you manage? How do you manage? We've got to be hitting those challenges. We've got to get political. We've got to say something about it. And I would also suggest that this financial burden is also the big cause of well-being and mental health challenges. And those of us working in higher education will know that our students really do present with complex issues now. The workload is immense for them. The demands of the programme that we present to them to gain proficiency, the length of the programme, the length of the programme is very challenging. You know, it's not a standard academic year. We're expecting them to work a lot longer, and they've got to do their study and their practice-based learning as well. Staffing levels are challenging out there in practice. So practice-based learning for students is challenging. The compassion fatigue they see in the workforce, and the challenge for practice supervision and assessment. And students are telling us they're really anxious about raising concerns. And I think students are exposed, aren't they? They're often exposed to poor practice. They're exposed to challenging situations, safeguarding, public health concerns, morale, burnout, bullying. Our students are exposed to that, and often they don't know how to raise concerns with us. Now, we've got some solutions. We've got some great solutions. This is just one that I'm showing you from Wales, but I know this work is going on across the UK. We have a toolkit to support students to raise concerns, because one of our challenges is to begin to prepare them right from day one to be those practitioners, those professionals who are prepared to speak out and say this is not acceptable for the people that we care for. Saying that, you know, we are fortunate. We have got standards of midwifery education. We've got standards of proficiency for midwives from the NMC. And we're really fortunate because these are evidence-based standards. Let's not forget that. They're based on evidence. And the other thing is, these are human rights focused standards. That's what we want from midwives. It talks very clearly about midwifery-led care. You know, the WHO is just looking at implementing midwifery models of care globally. We've got it in our standards. We talk about continuity of care. We talk about continuity of carer. But actually, whilst these are brilliant, I believe the NMC missed a trick. They missed a trick. Why didn't they come out? Why didn't they tell us about length of programme? We used to have 45 weeks. Our programme is still 45 weeks, as many of yours are. We can't fit these education standards into less than that. We need 4 years to educate midwives. I know here at Leicester you do that, but you know, I really want to appeal. If we're looking for challenge and how to meet those challenges, let's be kind to ourselves and say, if we want the best midwives, we need to have the best education, and cramming it into an academic year to fit with HEIs doesn't work. I'm very conscious I could go on forever, so I've got to really be careful with my timing. Nicky's looking at me here. 5 minutes. I also want to say that actually I want to challenge the RCM on that as well. We have a professional college. I work as head of health professions now. So I work with HCPC, I work with physiotherapists, occupational therapists. I can tell you the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists has really clear guidelines that universities have to adhere to. They can't turn around and say to physios, no, you will cut this, because actually the CSP says no. Even though they've got HCPC as well, where's the RCM in that? Why don't we have a college that says no to the universities? You can't do that. Then maybe we'd have some traction as educators. So sorry, controversial, but I'm putting the challenge out there. I'm putting the challenge out there. So we know maternity care is changing. I'm not going to go into this in detail. You know there's increased complexities, comorbidities. But what worries me the most is the increasing interventions in maternity care. Increased induction of labour, increased caesarean section rate, increased mortality rates in the UK, increased trauma, inequities, inequalities. It's really worrying, you know, decreased satisfaction. We've got to act. We've got to do something as midwives, and that starts in education. So there's a challenge for our students to achieve their numbers of births because of the complexities that are going on out there. So is it time to be looking at that? You know, we know the European Commission is looking at the EU directive currently. We won't go into that. We haven't got time to talk about it this morning. And I know we're no longer in the EU. But the NMC has adopted the directive, even though it's not called that. We need to be really looking at the evidence and what is right for practice here in the UK. And you may wonder then, why do I put the SDGs up there? Well, I want to say we actually need to be educating midwives to be addressing the SDGs. Do we think about SDG 13, climate change? Do we think of, what is the impact on midwifery, but what's the impact of us as midwives on climate change? Our students are coming in far more aware of this than we are in our generation. We need to get smart. We need to be sorting this, and we need to be educating along the Sustainable Development Goals because we work in a global society. So how are we going to meet these challenges? Well, if you want something you've never had, you've got to do something you've never done. We really need to take action. This is from Dr. Amelia Tuapolatu, who's the chief nurse of the WHO, and she said we need action, action, action. Strategy is all well and good, but it's no good without action. We as midwifery educators need to be making a stand, and we need to be making a stand locally in our HEIs, and believe me, I know how challenging that is. I'm in a HEI that is really in a difficult position at the moment, as most are in the country, and Nicky's going to go into the reasons why that is. But we need to be strong for our professional programmes because they're not always understood at university level. Oh, wrong way, sorry. I've gone too far now. There we go. We need courage to tackle the big issues. Here's another recent publication from WHO, which Heather's in the audience. We need to be tackling racism, equality, diversity, inclusion. We need to be thinking about what do we need to do so that our students start their midwifery career ready to be the right people to care for women, babies and families. We need to be looking at bullying. Bullying is rife in the NHS. We need to be tackling that from the beginning. Incivility. We know civility saves lives. How many of us talk about that in our programmes? I'm fortunate. We devised our programme with a year one module on human rights and fundamental freedoms. That's a module. We talk about incivility. We talk about unkind behaviour and the consequences of that right from the beginning, because that's what our students need to grow up with. Do you know, I saw this picture. I was very fortunate on holiday last week in New York, and this is outside the Rockefeller building. And I can't even see it now, but on the thing it says... Turn round. Oh, turn round. There we are. Wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy time. I thought, wow, that's quite profound. Do you know what? We've got wisdom, we've got knowledge, we've got great evidence. Do we use it? Not always, I suggest. But high quality care comes from evidence-based care, and that requires high quality education. So for people to receive the best, the safest care, we need wisdom, knowledge, skills, compassion and kindness as the fundamental cornerstones. And I've used this slide. Oh, I've gone the wrong way again. I've used this slide before because it really spoke to me when I was coming into land on a flight some time ago. I wasn't in the pilot, but I looked out of the window and I saw the runway, and this is what I saw. And these guiding lights are exactly the same everywhere in the world. Every pilot knows these guiding lights, and they can guide that plane into safety because they're the same wherever you go. You know, we've got guiding lights in midwifery. We need to make sure that we're all using them in the same direction to effect the changes so that we can tackle the challenges in midwifery education. It does feel it's a big mountain at the moment. It really does. But we have to have one voice, and we have to be using these universal lights. You know, we have standards that talk about universal care. You know, let's use the evidence we've got to make education the right education for midwives of the future. And that's me.
I'm talking about meeting the challenges facing midwifery education, and this is basically what I'm going to cover. So I'm going to look at the changing nature of educators over the years. I'm not going to dwell too much on that because I have talked about that before, but I think it's good to recap on that one. Obviously talking about the changing nature of the programme standards and proficiencies, because I keep telling everybody I'm 29. I think it's starting to wear a little bit thin since I've been at Hull 27 years. But over the lifetime of my time in education, I have seen significant changes. And I think it's good to be aware of that. Obviously, the issues facing universities, for those of us who are in universities will know of the challenging times we are facing. So I'm going to look at the university funding and basically look at why we are in this position, the challenges in universities, the challenges in practice, and how we can best meet those. So a bit of a tall order, so I shall crack on. So looking over the time of how we started, and it was actually in our rules. We used to have midwife rules, and you had to have done certain training, you had to have certain years of experience, you had to have done your advanced diploma in midwifery, and because bearing in mind we were state certified midwives then, and you had to do advanced diploma in midwifery and your teacher training, and you became a midwife teacher diploma, which was the MTD. And it was at that point that you could then be appointed as a midwife teacher. So very, very different. When we moved into universities in the mid-90s, this was quite a big change. Change in employer, salary, pension, completely different. I actually did my master's thesis on this, and I actually likened it to an arranged marriage. Talking about, the pillar talk, which was the preparation, the prenuptial arrangement, the offspring, which would be our students, and it all seemed to fit quite nicely with the metaphor. Obviously, the NMC standards have now removed, there is no requirement to be a qualified teacher before you start. The length of experience is also not stated. So what tends to happen is that new lecturers do undertake teacher training and higher degrees on the job. The requirement is also to achieve fellowship of the Advanced HE. We must continue to maintain our registration with the NMC, and obviously the pay in terms is actually compares very unfavourably to Agenda for Change, thinking about recruitment. And I have, for the first time over the last few years, had midwifery lecturers return back to clinical practice because it's better work-life balance and better pay. Now, that is something that really shouldn't happen. That is an address. And also, 50% of midwifery lecturers are over 50. So if we're looking at our professional standards, again, this is a very quick resume, but mid-1990s, so we moved into universities. 2009 became an all degree profession. We had grading of practice at the same time. Revalidation replaced prep. The SSSA came in 2018. NMC Future Standards came in 2019. We had a National Assessment of Practice document, the MORA in England and Northern Ireland, MPAD in Scotland, and All Wales MPAD. Electronic platforms came in, so we have PebblePad, My Knowledge Map, Pear, ARC, and so many others. And then we had COVID, where if you hadn't already transferred over to SSSA, it happened carte blanche. The emergency standards did cease in 2001, but it was a lot that happened in a very short space of time that was major, absolutely major. So if we're looking at universities, and as I say, we are in a very unusual position, having worked in universities now since 1990, and I have never ever come across a time like this that I can recall. So I'm going to look at the funding, I'm going to look at student numbers, I'm going to look at research, and I'm going to look at staffing. So funding for universities is predominantly from tuition fees, grants, and contracts for research and teaching. There is direct government funding, but generally the funds are managed as a whole. Research is funded primarily via two primary streams, and this is quality-related performance, thinking of the REF, and grants. Student numbers, obviously, which are a large funding stream for universities, they are currently being affected by cost of living. So students that do start with us, they do tend to suspend because of the cost and the cost of university tuition, which we know the fees are going up for the first time since, I think, 2012. So that's quite, but it's quite a small amount when you think the inflation is actually 29%. University access and obviously Brexit. I'm not going to get political, but you can't not mention the impact of Brexit on universities. It has led to a very sharp decline in student numbers, withdrawal of Erasmus funding, the decline in student mobility, equal opportunity, and recruitment of European students. This has significantly impacted universities, and also, likewise, because of what's happened on a global scale, the reduction in international students. So already you can see that there is a funding issue. Research, Brexit has significantly impacted European research funding. It's undeniable. EU-funded research projects are becoming much harder to find funding for those working in UK universities. European Research Council, of that, nearly 50% of all UK-based grant winners are nationals of different countries, and many are leaving UK universities due to the lack of security around European collaborations. So again, we have an issue then with funding from research. So universities have got an issue with student funding and research funding. We are investing in PhD study and MSc programs, a lot of pre-registration midwifery programs, and we are ahead of nursing in this field with our master students, which will help with research going forward. But funding for PhD, it's the time, because again, this is on top of the job. So if we're looking at staffing in universities, of course, we've got rising operational costs, capped tuition fees, which has been for several years, as I've just said, and a decline in international student numbers have placed immense pressure on university finances. It's believed this year that 40% of England's universities are expected to run budget deficits. Many universities have been forced to cut staff and cancel courses. There's been job freezes, voluntary and involuntary redundancies across the board. The staff-student ratio, not just in midwifery, this is generic universities, is also under scrutiny. The losses in research funding has made the UK less attractive also to high-quality European researchers and students. Many academics are leaving the UK, believing their vital European research partnerships are not protected. All of this is serving to significantly impact healthcare programmes in universities. This is a position paper from Universities UK, and they have said that the government's ambitious plans to strengthen the NHS can only be achieved if significant changes are made to healthcare education and training now. Almost a third of allied health professionals still in training have considered leaving, with 2 in 5 student nurses and a remarkable 3 in 5 student midwives, which is staggering. So looking at the challenges for midwifery lecturers, recruitment and retention, as I've said, is a problem. Recruitment because of the pay gap. It's undeniable in the cost of living crisis that we are all facing. Who wants to take a £10,000 salary drop? It's just not doable. Pension is different. So the experienced midwives that used to be a requirement is not there anymore. So we are getting fabulous midwives across the board to join our education teams, but they are often not the most experienced. And if we really want to invest in the quality of our registrants, it has to start with a quality in education. And they're saying, this is not, I mean, I've got a fabulous midwifery teaching team. Hello, if you're watching. And they're absolutely fantastic. And honestly, what they bring to the team, but it is the longevity. It is the top tier level positions. It is the institutional knowledge. It is the awareness of what's happening, the impact factor, all of those things that when you're doing the job, which, you know, all of our lecturers are, and they're studying at the same time to get the teacher training and to do a master's degree or PhD degree, how much can we possibly ask of them? You know, it is just a big, big ask. Retention, as I say, to the team, our teaching teams, is also problematic. We have had them return, you know, some return to clinical practice, huge loss, fully understand it. Fully understand it. The threat currently of real redundancies, you know, even the threat of it is enough to make people say, I'm going to jump ship. The stress and burnout of meeting all the requirements of the job and the student expectations that Grace has alluded to, which is higher than ever I've known before, because they are consumers. That changed when we came to be a fee, you know, when student fees came in. It changed the whole dynamic. But they are on a professional programme. There's all debates about whether we should be paying for key workers. Why should key workers have to pay to become a key worker? It does make a bit of a nonsense, but that's how it is. And of course, meeting the student expectations is quite time consuming. Of course we do it, and everybody will do it, but it's very, very hard because they are coming with so many more complex life experiences, issues, and what they're seeing in clinical practice is also very different. And of course, the National Student Survey. There's been education, we love the National Student Survey. But it does cause a problem because students do compare and they see what's happening in other universities and think that the grass is greener and not realising actually it's very, very similar. Then you look at the skill mix and, you know, how does that work? If you have got a lot of redundancies, it's usually from experienced staff. So that, again, it alters skills mix considerably. And there is very few, I mean, the Council of Deans, I know that Alison's talking later on, but the Council of Deans have been looking at this for some time, as Jane will know, about the level of top-tier representation in universities for midwives. It is very, very low. In fact, I don't even think, well, Alison will know better than me, if there is actually a midwifery dean anymore. Anywhere, that is anywhere. So if we're continuing looking at midwifery lecturers, of course, we need to recruit our students because that is what we need to obviously keep the university buoyant, to keep our workforce buoyant. It is, as Grace has already alluded to, problematic. We would get students, but because of all the pressures, what they're experiencing, the culture, which is widely reported on, they are struggling. So they will step off, and many that step off do not come back. And so again, it's looking at, because to over-recruit is a problem because we can't place them, but then if we lose them, then we've lost them to the profession, and it takes another 3 years to get that midwife. We have, as LMEs, we have very long discussions on a regular basis about interpretation of the NFC standards. There used to be unambiguous statements of which we followed religiously. They are now outcome focused, which means that they set what they want at the end of it, and how universities interpret it is fine, providing we can evidence that the product is what they want. And that's all well and good, but I've just put in a few really where we're having some discussions about. And one is systematic physical examination of the newborn. Now, the reason I mention that is because with universities we vary as to how many births, how many babies we expect students to actually examine to meet this. Some are 15, some are 50, some are 70, you know, and that's quite a big burden for students, and it is for the clinical staff. So if clinical staff have students from different universities, and one set of students need 15 to then have the assessment, and another needs 70, that is a big difference. And trying to explain the rationale behind that, you can't. You can't explain it because it's how it's been interpreted. Counting a birth is a huge hot potato at the moment. And, you know, do we count the 40 births? And if they don't have the 40 births because of the changing complexities and the high cesarean section rate, number of students, there's all sorts of reasons given. We have the 30-20 sort of like 30-20 within the standard, if you like, and that can be used to have 30 births, but then you have to have 20 where you have been personally involved. Now, interestingly, the 20 of the 30-20 has criteria that we've all agreed on, but there's no criteria for the 40 or for the 30, providing they personally facilitate the birth. We would like to think that they do look after all 3 stages. That's what the requirement is for the 20. But it's not there, you know, it's how it's counted, because it is actually down to the midwives that they are working with if they count it as a practice experience record. So again, it's all of that difference, and it can be quite different for different students. Practice hours, where do I start? Practice hours, there is so much going on with practice hours. Do we count breaks? Do we not count breaks? How long for reflection time? And again, within universities, there are differences. How do we explain that to students when one university doesn't count practice breaks, but another university does? The students share the same placements, midwives are confused, students are confused, and both seem to be right at the moment because the standards do not say either or. It's how it's interpreted. We do believe that the NMC are going to make a decision on this for us, and my plea is soon, please, because we have some upset students. You know, for some thinking, well, I work 4 weeks more than the university down the road because they count breaks, but we don't. Why is that? So it's very, very difficult. Simulation and what counts as simulation. In midwifery, we don't count simulation as any practice hours. Nursing clearly do. There's been a huge review on this, a lot of discussion, but again, it's there. And obviously attendance in theory, it used to be stating the standards and 100% attendance. Universities, well, certainly in my experience, we used to have an 80% attendance. That is no longer there. So it is how do we ensure that our students are attending, and should we be ensuring our students are attending because they're adult learners? But do we have a professional responsibility? Because if it's timetabled, we believe it's very important that they attend. But can we make them attend? And the argument is, well, just because they're sat there doesn't mean to say they're learning. So there is quite a lot that we discuss. But all of this is actually impacting on the student experience. And of course, students will work with their feet, and we want them to be competent, we want them to be safe, we want them to be knowledgeable, and it's how best can we achieve that everybody is happy, because we have to be sure, as LME, we've got a discussion this afternoon on the role of the LME, but I need to be confident that my students have got the required knowledge. But how do we know that? Because we do assess, but we can't assess everything, and as we know, the profession is like this, you know, and it's very different. Again, there's no regulated staff-student ratio. We used to have the 1:10. Oh, it was written in standards, 1:10, nursing was 1:15, and that is no longer there. So if we're looking at the challenges of midwifery practice, again, I'll quickly go on to this one because I'm aware of the time. How am I doing, Jane? Okay, sorry, I'm over. So staffing, I said, significant staff shortages, high levels of stress, reported burnout. It's all in the reports that Grace discussed about. We know that midwives are taking early retirement because of the stress and burnout. This again is impacting on skill mix. We have inexperienced midwives supporting students with increased complexity, and there is now the introduction of nurses in maternity, which I know the RCM are looking at. Obviously, understand the NMC standards. A lot of these came in during COVID when midwifery lecturers couldn't go in to support these midwives. Everything was very different. So it's understanding the assessment documents. There's Lindsay, hi Lindsay, who developed the MORA, and we keep asking Lindsay to our meetings because we all have queries and questions that come up in practice from midwives. And it's just working with this. Understanding the new roles of practice assessor, practice supervisor. Midwives are still wedded to mentorship. And there is no denying they are still ready to mentorship. And I think my rationalisation is because it came in COVID. and it was a sudden changeover for many, and it happened overnight. And of course, a lot of our first years were not in practice at the time, and so it was all very different, and we had to then go back and unpick it all to basically start from scratch again. And I think we are getting there, but also came with that with the online platform. And midwives of a certain age, you know, I'm not that techie. I do my best, but PlayStation, I have to give it to my children. How do you turn it off? I have no idea. And I think it is like that. So working with the online platform, getting around the students on the phones, they're not on Facebook. They are actually doing the more. They're doing the pocket, you know, the pocket guide, which is absolutely fine. Of course, recruitment of newly qualified. For the first time last year, we had a bit of an issue with recruitment of newly qualified for all sorts of reasons. And we do know that if students are not employed as soon as they qualify, they are very unlikely to return. So that was a loss. And obviously, I say we do have now, because staffing is affected in midwifery, in universities, that actually doing the link lecture is often the first thing to go, because the priority is teaching in the classroom. That is the priority. And of course, the adverse reporting of maternity services, which is quite demoralising. So we do have strong collaborative working. We do have MSc pre-registration programmes. We are looking to appropriately prepare and educate our midwifery lecturers. We are mindful of this. It's giving them time, but it's a big ask. We do want attractive packages, please, for midwives in education to retain our staff, to recruit the best staff to do this, to recognise the status of midwifery in universities. That is a battle at the moment that I think many of us in universities are facing, because it's a professional card. Some people just don't get it, and it is recognised that we do have standards, we do have regulators, and we can't just fall in line with what happens in universities per se. And if you have a top tier, you know, level of midwives in high positions in universities, they get it. They get it. We would really like an appropriate SSR, please, and financial support for students that's equitable, realistic, and fair. And of course, Grace has alluded to our League Global. Oops, sorry. Oh, there we go. So just quickly meeting the practice, as I say, it's all in there. So funding, pathways for that. I know there's Paula this afternoon talking about the advanced midwifery practice. So that's in there. Retention to the midwifery profession, preparedness of workforce, acceptance of report findings. That's what I'm finding now. Safe Learning Environment Charter for England, I say, which now has provided the mindset to address areas of concern. Recognition of staffing. Students continue to receive appropriate supervision by appropriately prepared educationalists and practice midwives. That's NMC language, appropriately prepared. That is ambiguous. What is appropriately prepared? We all have different views on that, but we try as LME group to align. So our mission, I think, as educationalists, is for education and practice to provide safe and competent care with compassion, kindness and respect for women and babies and families who access the maternity services, and to all those who work within it. And my plea, please, to our regulator is, we need, please, big please, a mandated levers from the regulator to protect the quality of midwifery education, please.
There, you caught me clapping. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to just quickly say another hello. We've got lots of people there that are watching, and I just want to say we know you're there. So we have Mel, student midwife from Bournemouth. We've got Deb, student midwife from Letchworth. And it's lovely to know the student midwives who are engaged in this as well. So they get a round picture of what's happening in their education. We have Sylvia Murphy-Tithe from Limerick. Hello, Sylvia. We have Juliet Samuel and Fola from Essex, our regular people. We've got Sheila Brown from North Wales, Natalie from Lincolnshire, Vicky from Glasgow. We've got a lot more, but these are the people who are named people. Well, thank you to Nicky and to Grace for sitting, because they've been sitting listening to themselves, and I have to say it's always a little bit uncomfortable listening to yourself. And even though I thought both presentations was fantastic, because there's a huge amount in there. And it really, for me, illustrates the challenges of being in education as a teacher, and certainly as a lead midwife for education, and the frustrations too of having to work within a system that is so challenging that, you know, you can't always explain to people why you're having to do things in a certain way. Now, I've got 2 questions now so far, and one is from Joe D'Augustin, who's often with us, very regular person with us. Hi, Joe. And her question is, thank you for your excellent work. I agree. Service users depend on you nurturing future midwives. Thank you. And her question is, NMC expects service users to be part of midwifery training in all sorts of ways. What should service users in that position look out for so that they can add the most value? So I'm wondering if that's possibly a Grace question.
Thank you very much for that question. It's a really, really important point, and we always engage with our service users as part of development of programs, ongoing, if you like, teaching and learning of the programs and assessment, but also it's about having service users as part of our recruitment into programs. And I would say that one of the key things that we'd really value you looking out for is the values and beliefs that we hold dear and important for midwifery. We want to be getting the right students in to our programs at the right time. And we want the students who are coming in with a real understanding of what they're coming into, but also it's about their values and beliefs. It's about the care and the compassion and the kindness to want to learn how to be a midwife. You don't need to know everything about being a midwife when you start a program, but you really need to have those fundamental values, and having that from a service user perspective is so important. And that's what I know in my institution we value, and I know that we talk about it across the whole of the UK as well. It's really important.
Fabulous. Thank you, Grace. Nicky, did you have anything to add to that response?
Very much like Grace. I mean, co-production is absolutely key. The service user perspective is a very interesting one and a valid one, because when you're immersed in anything, you don't often see the obvious, and it's someone who doesn't. When you know something inside out, you think you've got it, and then suddenly it points out something that is so fundamentally, glaringly obvious. You think, that's fantastic. Even quality assurance of education does have service user involvement. So it is at every level, from recruitment right through the whole programme to management of the programme to actually quality assurance of the programme from the NMC perspective, which is, again, a very valid perspective, and one that, yes, I think has made huge changes, to be honest, as to how we look at things. But I think it's, how long are you a service user for? I mean, my babies are quite old now, but there's lots of things I still remember as a service user, and some things, as I say, it's just nice to marry what you think as a professional from a service user. Any thoughts as a midwife? Worked there when I was a mum to be, when I was pregnant and when I had my children, but you forget because you go back into midwife mode.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Now we have another question, which is from Sheila Brown. What would you advise to strengthen the role of the LME in higher education institutions? Now, I just should say, for any of you who don't know, there's only one lead midwife for education in each institution, and she is, or he is, usually the most experienced person in midwifery education in that organisation, just so people know. So what would you advise? Now that's a good one. Should we start with Nicky? I suspect I know some of the answers that are coming.
So what's the question, Sue? Was it?
Sorry, the question is, it's from Sheila Brown, and what would you advise to strengthen the role of the lead midwife in HEIs?
Now, as a lead midwife education group, we have worked together to produce a job description that we all agreed with, and we worked with the Council of Deans, didn't we, Grace? And we have shared this with our deans to ensure that there is some consistency, because the role of the LME has, I would say that there's value placed on it at different levels in different institutions. And so as a group, we have worked really hard to develop this job description so that it is quite clear what our roles and responsibilities are. In the standards, there used to be quite an extensive remit, really, of the lead midwife education. That the lead midwife is still there, but not in the same level or to the same depth. So it's important that we have consistency, that of what our role is and what our responsibilities are. So as a group, we also have terms of reference of what we do as a group, and we are a stakeholder group, and we are all lead midwives for education, and we are strong as a group because it's ensuring that we do have consistency. We are working really hard. All the outcomes that of the standards where there is ambiguity, we have really worked as a group to see if we can have some consistency across our universities. It is quite difficult because it's two masters. We have the NMC as a master. I'm sorry, I think the puppies are barking, so if you can hear them, I apologise. So we do, but we also have the university as well, which is our employer, and it's actually minor too. But that's the lever that we need, is to have consistency. And if every university has it, and it is a requirement, but I do beg our regulator to please give us, as I said before, the levers that we need to ensure the quality of our midwifery education.
Close to heart. How about Grace? Did you want to add anything to that, Grace?
I mean, I think Nicky has spelled it out really well. And the one thing I would say is that we have to keep saying about it. We have to keep raising it all the time within our institutions. The fact that the LME is a statutory role. You cannot run a midwifery programme without an LME. And that really should be an experienced person in education, and that isn't always happening in all institutions now, and we have to be flagging that. We really do, and we have to keep saying, jumping up and saying, but this has to be. It's hard work and it's exhausting, but we have to keep that up, because the safety and quality of education, and that is the safety and quality of care for women and families and babies, depends on that.
Absolutely. And actually, I would add that you have to be very strong as the LME.
You do.
And in some universities, there are people who have been not as experienced, and you don't necessarily have the confidence to say,
Yeah.
I mean, see, you've always got the support of the NMC, but on occasion you have to say to the university, no, this can't happen. As in charge of quality of their midwifery education, it cannot happen. And if you're not very confident, or you're not at the top management table, which often you're not, it's much harder. But that's fantastic. Thank you. Now there's a comment from our Jane Marshall. Hi, Jane. Thank you for joining us. I think Jane would like a longer hour. Now, I always say this is the shortest hour of the week. But I take on board what you're saying, because I know as a midwife educationist, and we're all, the opportunity to debate and discuss is really important. But we will return to this, because I think it's really important that our midwife educators feel that they're heard and they're supported. So thank you, Jane, for that. Now, I've got another question. Whoa, this is from Juliet Samuel. Hi, Juliet. Good question as always. The content of the current midwifery programme is widening. Do you foresee the length of training expanding beyond 3 years? Oh, I can see both my colleagues jumping up and down. We'll start with Grace this time.
Oh, do you know, it is absolutely something that is essential, in my opinion. We pushed for it so hard when we were developing these standards. We really worked with the Council of Deans on it. and we took it to all the 4 countries in the UK, saying that we needed a 4-year programme for midwifery, which of course they have in several European countries. And we just didn't get the response we wanted. So as Nicky has said, I would put out that plea again and again to the regulator, but also to the college. You know, we need to be standing together on this and saying that the only way to be able to manage all the requirements of the standards and the proficiencies, and we also have additional pressures that come from government departments. You know, in Wales, we have a commissioned programme. We have another boss, if you like, again, who say, oh, you need to put this into the programme and you need to put that into the programme. How much can we cram in without risking the quality of that education? So I am absolutely for a 4-year programme. The other thing that would do is it would actually fit it into an academic year so that our students can breathe and actually not have to work day and night. It would ease some of those challenges that we went through in the presentations. It would ease the burden. Now, that also means that there would be more financial cost, of course, and that's where the difficulty comes in, because that can't be borne by student midwives. That has to be paid for 4-year education, in my opinion. I could go on, Sue, but I must stop.
No, but I mean, you can think of the savings, because when we lose, and I think Nicky said 3 in 5 students in some places, that's a huge loss of money in time and the whole contract. So it's worth thinking about from that point of view. We always have to be cognizant of money, uncomfortable as it is. It's a fact of life, isn't it? Now I'm going to move on because I've got a few more questions. You are fantastic tonight. All of those people behind there watching. We've got now a question from Vicky, 3rd-year student midwife from Scotland. Hi, Vicky. And she said, is there anything in the pipeline to support practice supervisors and practice assessors in placement, as they seem to expect very different standards from their students, depending on their own experiences and skills? That's a really good question, Vicky. And I think Nicky was highlighting that, weren't you, Nicky? Can you sort of, is there anything?
There is, that's the ambiguity again, because the standards say for the triple SA standards say appropriately prepared. That is so ambiguous. What is appropriately prepared? So what we look at is that we try and standardize it, and you tend to see that regions have what they call their preparation, and it's ensuring that it covers what is needed. But again, because there is no benchmark, so to speak, it's how appropriate we believe they are. For midwifery, we do try very much to be involved, because often it is done within the trust. So the trust look at nursing and midwifery together for the triple SA. Now, we know there are some nuances where nursing interpret the standards slightly different to midwifery, and the NMC are aware of that. And in midwifery, we take the standards literally, where the practice assessor does not work with the student, but obviously observes and has some regular meetings. But again, that's undertaken quite differently. One thing that I know that students say quite frequently is the lack of continuity of practice supervisor. Whereas with mentorship, of course, they worked 40% minimum, and often it was way in excess of that. And I think midwives actually struggle with that as well. It's actually looking, I mean, the reasons where that if your mentor, looking at mentorship, was a good mentor, then that was fine. If the mentor, or you did have some sort of differences of, you know, personalities, it can become a problem. And so the triple SA was to, I suppose, alleviate some of that, but it has caused quite a lot of anxiety with both supervisors and with students because of this lack of continuity. They feel that every day they're starting from scratch again with somebody new, and I can see really how that does work. So I don't know if that's really was behind the question, but some midwives, yeah, that they are individual and they will look at expectations, and I've had it said that some students are where they think they are, But again, you know, everybody learns differently. That's why we have a length of the programme, because everybody does learn at different rates, providing by the end of the programme that they have met what is expected, challenging as it is.
Fabulous. I think that's a fabulous answer. Thank you, Nicky. Now I'm trying to squeeze all the questions in. We've got a question from Joyce. Hi, Joyce. And she's saying, thank you for the amazing work. Hemoglobinopathies are one of the genetic conditions in the UK affecting Black and Asian communities. However, there's much teaching about the subject. There isn't much, I think. Is there any plans to increase students and midwives' knowledge about hemoglobinopathies? And that's another thing. I think actually that's an illustration of the difficulty of having a packed program where you want to put some more stuff in.
Yeah, absolutely, Sue. And I would say, you know, obviously I can only speak for my own institution, and this is something we definitely have as part of our program. But, you know, this is a key issue when we're looking at, you know, the differences, the inequities and the inequalities that exist across different people who use our maternity services. This is one of the key things we have to address. For Black and brown women, this may be something that is the most vital thing of their maternity care. So we absolutely need to be aware of the things that are important for the delivery of care. And as I say, it's in my programme. I think it is in the standards as well. So it should be covered across all programmes in the UK.
Fabulous. Thank you. Okay, I've got another question. Sheila Brown is having two questions today. Thank you, Sheila. And she's saying, students are upset that they cannot count care they provide in labour for birthing via an emergency caesarean sections. Are LMEs challenging this with the NMC? Interesting question. Nicky?
Yes, with our meetings, we have the agenda, and we meet about every 2 months, and we meet twice a year with the NMC. So this is something that is always agenda item and has been, I would say, for the last 2 years, because of the confusion of what counts as the 20. I think that's what Sheila's alluding to, is the 20. And we have discussed this, and there has been discussions. It's because there is this ambiguity of, is it an emergency caesarean or is it an elective caesarean section? So it's making sure there is a differentiation, because ultimately what we want is for student midwives to be able to care for women in labour. You know, this is the fundamental, to look at what the 3 stages are, and to care for women in labour safely and competently. Now, we've had huge discussions about, where does 40 come from? Where's the evidence behind the 40? You know, it's been 40, but where did it come from? It's just one of the numbers that we know. We've had this number for so long, and we feel it's about right. But as I said, there is no criteria for the 40. It's if you personally conduct the births. And we know that sometimes the birth, a student midwife may have literally gone in at the 2nd stage. We hope not, but it might have happened, and it's counted. So we debate this to the nth degree. We are hoping to have consensus. It's not off the table, and it won't be off the table for some time.
Right. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to just squeeze 2 more. There's going to be a comment and just a couple of teeny questions now. We've got a question from Mel. Thank you, Mel. And she said, could there be scope for education of qualified midwives? Oh, this is the continuing education aspect on how best to support students who are neurodivergent. So I'm not sure if Mel means midwives teachers or midwives, all midwives, but I guess it could be all midwives. I don't know. Is that one for Nicky or is that one for Grace? Grace is on.
I don't mind. What I would say is, I think this is a developing area and becoming more and more important, both for us within higher education, but certainly for practicing midwives and for those who are supporting our students to become midwives as well. And the RCM has done some great work on this already, and there's a great toolkit available, and there's continuing professional development on the RCM's website and on others as well. I'm sure, Sue, that you've got some work on neurodivergency within maternity care as part of your box sets as well. And I think it's something that is vitally important as we go forward, because we haven't really, certainly when I've all the way through my education, and I am old now, but there was nothing to consider the women we care for who may have aspects that we don't know how to care for them, and what is the effect of coming into maternity units on neurodivergent people. So there's a lot more work to be done on this, and I agree it's definitely a CPD topic, but it also needs to be included in our education programs at pre-registration as well.
Fabulous. Well, now Sheila Brown has said, well done, Grace, for the you make such an impassioned case for longer programs, says Joe D'Augustin too. So that's feedback. So we've got that far, and I'm looking down at my little Twitter messages, and then this is going to be the last question. And Sheila Brown, this is the third question, Sheila, and thank you for it. And she said, how long are programs out there? 42, 45 or less? I guess that the LMEs are probably mapped out.
Is that weeks? Was that weeks?
42, 50, no, 45 that must be months, I think, isn't it?
I think it's weeks. I think it's weeks per
36.
year. Now, the NMC, the standards used to say 45 programmed weeks over a 3-year period.
Okay, got you.
Whereas now the standards say minimum of 2,300 hours of theory and 2,300 hours of practice for the 3-year, well, for the long program, and either 3,000 for an 18-month, which is invariably 20 weeks, because you can't get 3,000 hours into 18 months, and it's 3,600 for a 2-year program for adult nurses. So it actually works on the hours. So and this is where I talk about the ambiguity, because if some places count practice breaks, for example, that is actually some more hours than those that don't. And so that will then determine the program weeks per length, because obviously they're going to be slightly shorter than those universities that don't count breaks. So I'm not quite sure what the question was now, but going back to the length, it is meeting the standards. So you can actually have a 6-year program if we wanted, and that's in line with the standards. But would we actually get anybody on it? When we did argue strongly for a 4-year program. But and KPMG enough to prompt a survey by KPMG, and it the students that form part of that consultation and practice partners, they did not want a 4-year program, they wanted a 3. So it was LMEs that wanted a 4, but were outvoted. So whether that is revisited or it becomes a standard,
I have to say,
time will tell.
I guess as a student, you might think, oh, I could cope with 3 years, but I don't think cope with 4 years of being hard up.
I understand the cost. I understand it entirely, but we knew how much had to go into these programs.
It's not like a normal course, especially with the practice component. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Fantastic. You see, Nicky just quotes these hours, and every LME will be able to quote the hours. I was thrown a bit by the 42, 43, whatever. But anyway, the closing comments, there's lots of chat going on there as well. And someone has said, what great midwifery leaders we're honoured to hear from tonight. Absolutely. And I as I said, now I've been a bit sneaky because this isn't an hour at all. This is an hour and 20 minutes. But hey, we're worth it. But I do assure you, those of you out there, we will return and have another midwifery education focused forum, and make sure there's plenty of time for debate and discussion. We'll try some different things next year. We've got some quite exciting things planned for next season. I can't believe that going into next year is going to be the 5th year coming in to the maternity midwifery hour. Weird. Anyway, so I'm going to say now, a big thank you to Nicky and Grace for coming along, listening to themselves. And I have to say, their presentations, I've seen a couple of times now, and they're so full of information. And in some parts quite, I won't say depressing, but it's challenging. But I hope you understand that these two LMEs are passionate about midwifery education, and this really matters. And this matters not just to them, but it matters to their team of teachers and, of course, their students. But ultimately, it matters for those women, their babies and families, because those are the people, they're the people we really serve, and they're the really important people, and it's close to all of our hearts. So thank you so much, Nicky and Grace, for coming along and being so wonderful this evening and answering all the huge questions that we had. Thank you also, and thank you Angelo, because he's making sure this is packaged so you can access it after this. You might want to play this in your unit to your friends. We're very happy for these things to be shared and to play to your friends or to your colleagues and really get a feel of what's happening in midwifery education, because this really matters. Because if you don't have good education, you're not going to have the good midwives, you're not going to have enough support of that evidence base, which Grace was really emphasizing so beautifully. And so this is going to be accessible on the Facebook site. It's going to be accessible in that podcast for those of you who like a podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning. It'll be there on Friday. Now, next week, we're going to look at exploring language issues in midwifery through unscripted role play. And that's with Sebnem Suzanne Sarajevo and Dr. Jenny Patterson. And they did a session yesterday doing this very live as a workshop, but they're going to talk about how it happens, how they do it, and what it means, all the themes that come from that. We've also set up the London Festival, 11th February, I think. I should know, in 2025. I'm a bit scared. 2025, the year's just flying by. So in the meantime, thank you for joining us. It's been lovely having a really lovely midwifery education discussion. Uncomfortable at times, but still fantastic. And thank you for fabulous questions and our wonderful presenters. See you next week. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and your loved ones as well. Give them a good hug. Take care.